Other issues. Two words: calm, polite, almost throw away. But let me talk to you directly now. Those words are a warning. When Ferrari boss Fred Vasseur says the SF25 problems are gone, but other issues are coming in 2026, he's not talking about aerodynamics or regulations. He's talking about something far more dangerous for Ferrari: Lewis Hamilton's presence. Because Hamilton doesn't just drive a car, he exposes systems, he stresses structures, he forces teams to confront truths they'd rather bury under tradition and politics. In 2025, the SF25 underperformed. Yes, ride height problems, plank wear, the China disqualification, but listen carefully, those weren't the disease, they were the symptoms. The real issue started when Hamilton began questioning why Ferrari stopped developing the car in April, why long-run confidence was ignored, why feedback was acknowledged, but not acted upon. Inside Maranello, that created tension, not noise, silence. The kind of silence that appears when a 7-time world champion asks questions no one wants to answer. So when Vasseur says other issues, understand this: Ferrari isn't afraid of 2026 rules. Ferrari is afraid of what Lewis Hamilton will demand from them next. And that's where this story really begins. Now stay with me, because other issues isn't technical language, it's political language. Inside Ferrari, other issues means this: who is the team really built for now? And that question exists only because Lewis Hamilton is there. In 2025, Hamilton didn't shout, he didn't point fingers, he did something far more threatening in Maranello. He compared, he referenced structures he'd lived in before, how Mercedes reacted when a driver said, "I don't feel the rear," or how decisions accelerated instead of being debated, how leadership absorbed pressure instead of deflecting it, and suddenly Ferrari's old reflexes were exposed. Because when Hamilton asked for changes that required philosophical commitment, the team hesitated, development was paused, focus was shifted to 2026. Officially, it was strategy. Unofficially, avoidance. The SF25 became a placeholder because fully listening to Hamilton meant admitting the entire concept was wrong. That's an issue, not mechanical, and cultural. So when Vasseur talks about a completely different 2026 car, understand the subtext. Ferrari isn't just redesigning a chassis. They're trying to redesign authority without losing control to the very driver capable of leading them back to titles. Hamilton is the hero here not because he dominates results, but because he forces truth. And Ferrari? Ferrari isn't used to that. Here's where the language gets very interesting. When Vasseur jokes that the 2026 car is really Loic Serra's project, his first baby, that's not humor, that's positioning. Because inside Ferrari, names matter, blame matters, ownership matters. The SF25, that car still carries the DNA of Enrico Cardiel. Even after he left for Aston Martin, his philosophy remained baked into the concept. Narrow operating window, aggressive floor sensitivity. A car that looks great in simulation and collapses when confidence disappears. And who was the first driver to call that out clearly? Lewis Hamilton, not emotionally. Technically, he described it as a platform that punishes hesitation. That line traveled through the factory faster than any lap time, because once a driver like Hamilton says that, the illusion is gone. So Vasseur does something clever. He shifts the narrative forward. New regulations, new leadership, new challenges. Suddenly, the past is framed as someone else's responsibility, and the future becomes Serra's burden. But here's the tension no one is saying out loud. If the 2026 car still shows the same weaknesses, Ferrari can't hide behind Cardiel anymore. And if Serra listens closely to Hamilton, really listens, then authority inside Maranello shifts again, away from tradition, away from hierarchy, toward performance truth. That's why first baby matters. It's not about pride, it's about who Ferrari will protect when pressure arrives. Let's talk about something Ferrari never models in CFD: psychology. Because while everyone focused on lap time deficits and ride height charts, something far more revealing was happening inside the cockpit of Lewis Hamilton. He wasn't angry, he wasn't dramatic, he was observant. That should terrify Ferrari. Hamilton has seen this movie before. The early McLaren tension, the post-2016 Mercedes power shifts, and when he feels a team avoiding hard truths, he doesn't explode. He slows down emotionally. He starts asking precise questions. He repeats feedback. He watches who reacts and who deflects. In 2025, his radio messages were unusually neutral, almost detached. But insiders noticed something else. Debriefs got longer, explanations got sharper, and when answers became circular, Hamilton stopped pushing publicly. That's not resignation. That's data collection. Ferrari misread that silence as compliance. In reality, Hamilton was mapping the organization. Who listens? Who protects legacy decisions? Who's afraid to say, we were wrong? So when Vasseur later says the SF25 issues are gone, Hamilton knows better, because problems don't disappear, they evolve. And other issues is Ferrari admitting subconsciously that the core challenge was never the car, it was readiness. Readiness to follow a driver who doesn't need to shout to lead. April 2025. That's the month everything quietly broke. Ferrari called it strategic focus. Hamilton read it as retreat. When development on the SF25 was effectively frozen, insiders framed it as a smart pivot to 2026. New regulations, clean slate, long-term thinking. But here's what doesn't add up. Teams that believe in their structure don't abandon a season when they still have a driver like Lewis Hamilton asking for solutions. That's the red flag. From Hamilton's side, the message was brutal but clear. We're not fixing this. Not because it couldn't be fixed, but because fixing it would mean admitting the concept was wrong at its core. Ride height sensitivity, confidence loss over long runs, a car that punished precision instead of rewarding it. Hamilton didn't just feel it, he articulated it, calmly, repeatedly. And when April arrived with no meaningful upgrades, he understood something fundamental about Ferrari's mindset. They chose protection over progress. This is where the hero narrative matters, because most drivers adapt, cope, survive. Hamilton doesn't. He evaluates. He asks whether the environment is worthy of championship energy. And once that question appears, everything changes. The rest of the season, Abu Dhabi, fourth in the standings, that was just noise. The real damage was internal. A trust fracture that Ferrari still hasn't repaired. And now, in 2026, they say other issues are coming. Of course they are, because when you ignore a champion's warning once, you don't erase the consequences by changing regulations. Here's the part no press release will ever touch: hierarchy. Ferrari doesn't just run on engineering, it runs on legacy, internal balance, and unspoken lines you're not supposed to cross. And when Lewis Hamilton arrived, he didn't kick the door down. He walked in and asked why the door was there in the first place. That alone was destabilizing, because Hamilton doesn't behave like a guest star. He behaves like a reference point. His feedback carries historical weight, not opinion, but pattern recognition across title-winning structures. And inside Maranello, that creates friction with long-standing voices who built careers under a very different philosophy. Protect the concept, defend the process, control the narrative. Some welcomed him quietly, others felt exposed. So when Vasseur talks about other issues, understand this layer. Ferrari is wrestling with whether authority comes from hierarchy and or from performance truth. And that's not a technical debate, that's identity. Hamilton's presence forces that question every day, in meetings, in debriefs, in how problems are framed. And for an organization built on tradition, that pressure is uncomfortable. This is why the 2026 reset is being framed so carefully. New regs aren't just an opportunity, yet they're a chance to reassert control before Hamilton's influence reshapes the structure permanently. But here's the risk Ferrari is taking. If they try to contain Hamilton instead of aligning with him, the other issues won't be growing pains. They'll be fractures. Now let's connect every thread, because this is bigger than one bad car or one awkward season. 2026 isn't just a regulation reset, it's a verdict. Ferrari says the philosophy will be completely different. New chassis, new power unit, new faces in charge. But the real question isn't what changes, it's who the team chooses to believe when things go wrong. Because things will go wrong. Vasseur already admitted that with his other issues line. When that moment comes, Ferrari will face a fork in the road. Do they trust simulations, committees, and legacy processes? Or do they trust the driver who has navigated multiple regulation eras, rebuilt teams, and delivered championships under pressure? That driver is Lewis Hamilton. This is why Hamilton is the hero of this story. Not because he dominated in 2025. He didn't. But because he revealed the truth early. He showed Ferrari where they hesitate, where they protect themselves, where they fear accountability. Most teams would kill for that insight. Ferrari flinched, and now 2026 becomes the moment of honesty. If Ferrari truly listens to Hamilton, aligns structure with feedback, and allows authority to flow toward performance rather than tradition, the other issues become growing pains. If not, They become history repeating itself with a different car and the same silence. So let me leave you with this and really think about it. Ferrari keeps saying the problems of the SF25 are gone, but Lewis Hamilton knows something they're still dancing around. Problems don't vanish when you change regulations. They resurface when pressure returns. The phrase other issues is Ferrari admitting quietly that the hardest work isn't in the wind tunnel, it's in the mirror. 2026 will test whether Ferrari is finally ready to follow a driver who doesn't just want speed, but clarity. A driver who exposes weak structures not by shouting, but by surviving them long enough to map every crack. That's why Hamilton is the hero here. He didn't arrive to save Ferrari with miracles. He arrived to force truth, and truth is uncomfortable in Maranello. If Ferrari listens, 2026 could become the rebirth they've promised for a decade. If they don't, other issues will become the most honest sentence Vasseur has ever spoken. The moment they admitted they were afraid of what a champion reveals. Because history is ruthless. And teams don't fail because they lack talent. They fail because they ignore the one person who sees the storm coming. This story isn't finished. It's just waiting for the lights to go out in 2026.